Sometimes just when we think certain ideas have, well, run their course, they have this incredible way of resurfacing,
Hmm.
popping back up, demanding our attention all over again.
Yeah, it's like some core ideas never really fade away, no matter how often they're called obsolete.
Exactly. And today we're embarking on a deep dive into just such a set of ideas.
Hmm.
The philosophy of Karl Marx,
Mm-hmm.
widely known as Marxism.
Right. And we're looking at sources mainly from around 2018, his 200th birthday.
Yeah, and these sources, they present a really vibrant, compelling case for its continued relevance. Some even say its relevance is amplified now.
Hmm.
So our mission is pretty clear. We want to unpack the core tenets of Marxism as described in these materials.
Right. Focusing on their take.
We'll dig into its key intellectual components and try to really understand why, from this specific viewpoint, it's seen as more pertinent than ever.
Huh.
Okay, let's get into it.
And what's, I think, really insightful here is that we're exploring this whole worldview just through the lens of these specific sources. We're not here to agree or disagree with Marxism ourselves.
No.
It's about understanding their explanation of its history, how they lay out its claims, and how they see its role today.
Just understanding the framework they present.
Precisely. Comprehending that specific framework.
Okay, so let's dive straight into the absolute basics, drawing from this source called Fundamentals of Marxism.
Okay.
At its heart, these texts explain, Marx saw capitalism as, well, a chaotic system of production beyond the control of humanity.
Chaotic, okay. Not just an economic engine, but something wilder.
Yeah, and while he totally acknowledged it boosted human productive power massively.
Sure, the Industrial Revolution and all that.
Right. He also saw it as doomed to plunge society into ever greater crises. It's a cycle, almost self-destructive, according to them.
And that's not just like a side effect in their view.
No, not at all. The sources really emphasize this. These crises aren't just bumps in the road.
They're built in.
Exactly. Intrinsic, unavoidable features of the system itself. Moments where the internal contradictions just flare up.
Contradictions, like what specifically?
Like the drive for profit constantly clashing with society's actual ability to buy all the stuff being produced.
Okay. Overproduction, that kind of thing, leading to instability.
Right. Widespread instability, social upheaval. It's a powerful claim about, the very DNA of capitalism as they see it.
So if capitalism is seen as fundamentally chaotic, did Marx identify anything inside the system that could maybe change it?
He did, and this is where the sources bring in the modern proletariat.
Okay, the working class.
Well, yes, but they define it quite specifically. Not just workers, but the class whose labor powers everything.
But owns none of the factories, the tools, the means of production.
Exactly. And this class, they argue, is uniquely positioned. It's set to overthrow the capitalist class.
And the goal?
To use modern production, all that capacity we talked about, to build a planned economy for the benefit of all.
So it's not just pointing out a problem, but also identifying who they see as the agent for change.
Precisely. And they insist these ideas aren't just old history. They state quite boldly these ideas are vastly more in touch with the general processes in our world today than most modern texts.
Wow, that is a bold claim. More relevant than current thinking.
And this idea of capitalism's inherent issues actually links to a broader point the sources make.
Which is?
That Marx wasn't just pulling this stuff out of thin air. His ideas, they argue, are deeply rooted.
In what came before?
Yes, presented as a direct continuation of the biggest thinkers from German philosophy, English political economy, and French socialism.
So building on giants.
Right. He's said to have developed not just ideas, but a whole method, a comprehensive philosophy and a world outlook purely derived from the material world that we live in.
Okay, material world is key there, I imagine.
Absolutely. And here's where it gets, well, really fascinating. These sources explicitly call Marxism the science of the underlying laws that govern nature and society.
Science. That's a strong word, like physics or biology.
That's the claim. And they say it's far from a dead, dry ideology. Instead, it's the science of revolution, a guide to action.
A guide to action, so practical, not just theoretical.
Exactly. They argue that seriously studying these ideas is an urgent necessity for anyone trying to understand and, crucially, change the world today.
The claim of scientific rigor is definitely central to their case for its power.
It is.
But it makes you ask, what are these laws and methods that make it, in their view, this potent science of revolution?
Good question.
Does science here mean everything is predetermined? Or is there still room for, human choice and action.
That's a really important distinction, and the sources are careful about this.
Okay.
While they talk about uncovering underlying laws, they stress it's not like a fixed prophecy. You can't just sit back and wait.
So it's not deterministic in that simple way.
No. It's presented more as a framework for understanding historical tendencies and contradictions. The guide to action part implies that human awareness, collective effort, that's still essential.
So it provides the map, but people still need to drive the car, so to speak.
Exactly. It's about understanding how change can happen if you grasp these laws and act. It's a blueprint, maybe, not a crystal ball.
Got it. That clarifies the science aspect a bit.
So, to really get a handle on this comprehensive method, the sources break Marxist theory down
Okay.
into what they call three component parts. Broadly, they line up with philosophy, social history, and economics.
The three pillars.
Right. Let's dig into each one as these materials explain them.
Sounds good. Where do we start?
First up, dialectical materialism. This is described as the core philosophy of Marxism.
The foundation.
Yeah. And we see a lot of discussion on this from Alan Woods. He wrote Reason and Revolt and History of Philosophy, a Marxist perspective.
Right. And he spoke at that Marx in a Day event back in 2018.
Exactly, celebrating the 200th birthday. His work really goes deep into this whole philosophical line.
So what's the core idea of dialectical materialism, according to these sources? Is it just abstract stuff?
They argue it's not just abstract debates. It's fundamentally a method for understanding how change happens.
Okay, how?
Through the struggle of opposing forces. Contradictions, not just in society, but in nature too.
Like a constant push and pull driving things forward.
Kind of, yeah. Think thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Contradictions don't just block things. They're the engine of development.
And the sources link this to Engels.
They do. They reference Engels saying the laws of dialectics are abstracted from the history of nature and human society.
Abstracted from reality, not imposed on it.
Right. And they're seen as the most general laws of historical development and even of thought itself.
So it's a way of seeing the world as constantly moving, dynamic, shaped by these internal tensions.
Exactly. And the materialism part is crucial too.
Yes. Dialectical materialism. What about that part?
It stresses that our material conditions, how we produce things, how we live, fundamentally shape our ideas, our social structures, our history.
Not the other way around. Ideas don't primarily shape conditions.
That's the core argument here. Material base shapes the superstructure of ideas and institutions.
Okay. And Wood's book traces this idea.
Yeah, he traces this whole philosophical line from ancient Greece through Enlightenment thinkers, Hegel's dialectics, and then how Marx and Engels created scientific socialism.
So it's presented as building on, but also transforming earlier thought.
Exactly, an evolving intellectual journey.
Okay, pillar one. Dialectical materialism. What's next?
Next up, historical materialism. This is the Marxist view of history itself.
Applying that dialectical materialism to history.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Josh Holroyd discussed this at that same 2018 event, and Alan Woods has a work on it. What is historical materialism?
And they frame this as the scientific basis for understanding history.
That's the term they use, yeah, establishing a scientific basis for it.
So this really gets to that question. If ideas aren't the main driver of history, what is?
According to these sources, the ultimate cause of all social change is to be found not in the human brain, but in changes in the mode of production.
Okay, mode of production. That sounds important. What does that entail?
It's basically two things. First, the forces of production. That's tech, tools, machinery, labor skills.
The actual capacity to make stuff.
Right. And second, the relations of production. That's how society is organized around production.
Like property ownership, class structures.
Sure.
Who controls the means of production?
Exactly. So historical materialism argues it's the interplay, the tension between these sources and relations that drives history forward.
How so? Can you give an example?
Sure. They'd argue that societal evolution, say, from feudalism to capitalism, happens when the existing relations, like feudal lords and serfs,
Become a roadblock.
they become a fetter, holding back the development of the productive forces, like new technologies or the merchant class's activities.
Which leads to conflict, revolution.
Right. Bourgeois revolutions, in that case, to break those old relations and establish new ones, capitalist ones that allow the productive forces to grow again.
So it shifts the focus from, like, kings and queens or big ideas to these underlying economic structures.
Exactly. It's a different lens for interpreting the whole sweep of human history.
Okay, that makes sense within their framework. Philosophy, history. What's the third pillar?
The third pillar is Marxist economics.
Right. Getting into the nuts and bolts of capitalism itself.
Precisely. Rob Sewell, who edits Socialist Appeal, explained the fundamental concepts and the crisis of capitalism in another talk from that 2018 event.
Connecting back to that initial idea of capitalism being inherently crisis-prone.
Directly. This economic analysis is presented as the framework needed to understand why those crises happen, again and again.
And without the specific Marxist lens, the sources argue, you can't really grasp why economies are so unstable.
That's their contention. They'd say other explanations miss the systemic roots, seeing crises as accidents or anomalies rather than predictable outcomes.
So can you give us a bit more on how they explain those economic contradictions? What are some of those fundamental concepts Sewell talked about?
Sure. The sources, through Sewell's points, emphasize Marx's labor theory of value.
Okay, what's that?
Basically, the idea that the value of something you buy isn't arbitrary, it's determined by the average amount of labor time needed to produce it.
Socially necessary labor time. Yeah.
Exactly. And the core contradiction, as they explain it, comes from how workers are paid.
Go on.
Workers create all the value through their labor, but they only get paid for part of that value, their wages, enough to live on and keep working.
And the rest?
The rest is the surplus value. The difference between what workers produce and what they're paid. That, they argue, is taken by the capitalist class as profit.
Okay. So surplus value is where profit comes from, but it's also the root of the inequality.
That's the argument.
Yeah.
And this relentless drive to maximize surplus value, plus the competition between capitalists.
Pushes them to constantly innovate, find efficiencies.
Right. Cut costs, automate, which is efficient, but it also leads to what Marx called the tendency of the rate of profit to fall over the long term.
Okay. And how does that connect back to crises?
Well, it intensifies things. It exacerbates crises of overproduction, making more stuff than the working class, whose wages are kept down to boost surplus value, can actually afford to buy.
A vicious cycle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Marxist economics, according to these sources, provides the tools to understand this whole dynamic, the cycles, the instability. They argue it's not just bad luck or bad policies, but baked into the system.
Okay, so that covers the three pillars, the
Yeah.
philosophy, the history, the economics.
So the big question then is, what does all this mean for us now?
Right. The contemporary relevance.
And the sources we've looked at make a really bold claim here. They say, no set of ideas has been pronounced dead more frequently than that of Marxism.
I've definitely heard that narrative before.
Right. Yet, 200 years after the birth of Karl Marx, his ideas stand as vibrant as ever.
So a direct contradiction to the dead idea narrative.
Absolutely. They even assert that bourgeois thought is at an impasse, unable to truly grasp the events that are shaking up the world of our time.
Bourgeois thought, meaning mainstream thinking, conventional economics, political science.
Essentially, yes. Thinking that operates within the existing capitalist framework, they're saying it just can't adequately explain what's happening globally.
That's a strong critique. Do they offer examples of what mainstream thought is missing?
Well, they point to things like the sheer depth and persistence of the wealth gap, or why major financial crises keep happening despite attempts to regulate.
And mainstream explanations fall short, in their view.
They argue mainstream thought often treats these as, glitches in the system, problems that can be managed or fixed with the right policies.
Whereas Marxism says,
That these aren't glitches, they're features. They're inherent systemic outcomes of capitalism that you can't just tweak away within the system's own rules.
I see. So they claim a deeper explanatory power for these persistent issues.
Exactly. And what's really fascinating is how they connect this to now. They argue Marxism's relevance is actually being amplified by current global conditions.
How so?
They describe capitalism today as being in its deepest crisis in its history.
Deepest ever. That's huge.
Yeah, an economic, social, and political crisis all rolled into one, leading to political turmoil and growing class struggle across the globe.
So they see current events as basically proving Marx's predictions right.
That seems to be the core argument. And they paint this picture. While the 99% are being asked to pay for the crisis, the 1% are amassing wealth at an ever-accelerating pace.
A picture that probably resonates with a lot of people watching the news.
For sure. And it makes you wonder, if this inequality was part of the theory way back then, what makes them think it's, qualitatively different now?
That's a good point. Is it just more of the same or something new?
The sources suggest it's both. The scale of inequality, the global reach of the crisis, combined with today's incredible productive technology.
Creates a situation maybe even more extreme than Marx himself saw.
That's the idea,
Yeah.
amplifying the contradictions he identified. And they argue this whole situation is alienating millions from traditional politics.
People feeling like the existing system isn't working for them.
Right. Causing a deep questioning of capitalist society itself, with, they claim, a growing number, looking towards revolutionary socialism for the answer.
A search for alternatives.
Yeah. Which brings us back to the core question. Why do these sources argue that Marxism specifically holds the answer?
Is it just because it diagnosed the problem early?
It's more than that, according to them. It's both the diagnosis and the proposed solution.
Okay.
They present Marxism not just as an analysis, but as that framework for understanding and enacting change, because it locates the roots of the crisis in the system itself.
It logically points towards changing the system itself as the solution.
Precisely. A revolutionary transformation.
Yeah.
And that's why they frame studying these ideas not just as academic, but as an urgent necessity for anyone wanting to actively change society.
So it's presented as both the explanation and the toolkit for action, especially now.
Exactly. A diagnostic tool and a blueprint, especially in what they see as a time of profound crisis.
Wow.
What a journey, huh? From that foundational critique of capitalism as chaotic, the vision of a planned economy.
Through those three pillars, the philosophy of dialectical materialism, the historical materialism view of history, and the Marxist economics critique.
All the way to these contemporary arguments for its urgent relevance today, arguing it's essential for understanding a world in deep crisis.
Yeah, it's clear these specific sources see Marxism not as some historical artifact, but as a vital, living framework.
Absolutely. A tool for understanding and, for them, changing our world.
And this whole deep dive, thing just to what these sources say, it really offers a distinct and, frankly, powerful perspective on these ideas, doesn't it?
It really does.
It definitely leaves you with something to think about. A key question maybe for you, the listener, to consider. If, as these sources argue so strongly, the ultimate cause of all social change is to be found not in the human brain, but in changes in the mode of production, how might that idea fundamentally change the way you look at current events? Or even how you interpret history you thought you understood?
That is a powerful thought to chew on. Does it shift the focus from individual choices and leaders to deeper structural forces?
Potentially. It's definitely a challenge to how we often think about why things happen in society.
A great question to leave things on. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the ideas of Karl Marx, and specifically, these sources' claims about Marxism's enduring power.
Thanks for the discussion.
Until next time, keep digging, keep questioning, and keep learning.